The Viking Age usually arrives in our heads with noise, shouting, oars slapping water, someone dramatically standing on a prow, looking important. But most of Viking life was not loud. It was slow. It was repetitive. It was cold in ways that didn't care about heroism. Men and women spent more time doing ordinary things than legendary ones. They worried about food, about whether their boots were still mostly waterproof. And for sailors, there was one problem that never really went away. Where do you sleep when you live on a long, narrow wooden boat that leaks a little? Smells like fish, and does not care if you are tired. Because Viking longships were not designed for comfort. They were designed to move, fast, through cold water, in bad weather, with just enough space for people, gear, and very little else. And every night, whether they were raiding, trading, or just going somewhere that took longer than expected, someone had to lie down inside that narrow wooden shape and try to sleep. In wind, in spray, in freezing air, on planks, next to other tired people with damp clothes that would probably not dry. So tonight, we are not chasing battles. We are not counting victories. We are just watching tired sailors slowly settle themselves into uncomfortable positions and pretend it is fine. Because it has to be fine. There is nowhere else to sleep. And while history loves loud moments, most of life happens quietly. Usually at night, when no one is watching, when even Vikings just want to close their eyes and stop feeling cold for a while. And that is where we begin. Before we drift too far, if you enjoy slow history and very calm voices, you might want to subscribe. It helps the channel quietly continue. And if you feel like it, leave a comment with your city and the time you're listening. It is always mildly interesting to know where tired people are. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Longship as a place to lie down before anyone ever tried to sleep in a Viking longship. Someone had to build it, which meant long days of shaping wood, cutting oak, bending planks with steam, fitting ribs like a skeleton that would someday float. Shipbuilders did not think much about comfort. They thought about balance, about strength, about speed. A longship had to be light enough to pull onto a beach, strong enough to survive waves, and narrow enough to cut through water without arguing about it. The result was a boat that looked elegant from the outside and felt very honest on the inside. Honest in the sense that it did not pretend to be soft. The inside of a longship was mostly wood. Wooden planks forming the sides. Wooden ribs rising like the curved bones of a whale. Wooden benches along the sides where rowers sat. Between those benches was a narrow central space where cargo went. Chests, barrels, ropes, weapons, food, sometimes animals. If someone had made questionable travel plans, there were no cabins, no separate rooms, no private corners, unless you counted the space behind a barrel where no one wanted to sit anyway. When the ship stopped for the night, the same space became the sleeping area, which meant people simply lay down where they could. Some slept on the rowing benches, some on the floor between cargo, some half on wood and half on someone else. It was not assigned seating. It was more like whoever is tired first chooses first. And when the ship was at sea, there was no real stopping in the modern sense. Longships could sail day and night if they needed to, which meant sleep happened in pieces. Short stretches, a few hours at most. Someone rowed. Someone watched the sea. Someone tried to rest. So sleeping was not an event. It was something that happened when nothing else was being demanded of you at that exact moment. Now imagine the temperature. Northern seas are not polite. Ebenin, Sumer, the wind is cool. In winter, it is sharp. The longship had no walls, no roof. Sometimes a small sail could be lowered to create a bit of shelter. Sometimes a cloth awning might be stretched, but often there was simply open sky above and cold air moving wherever it wanted. So a Viking sailor preparing to sleep would not think, "How can I be comfortable?" He would think, "How can I be less uncomfortable than I was a minute ago?" He would check his clothes. Wool tunic, wool trousers, maybe a cloak. Wool stays warm, even when damp, which is good, because everything near the sea is at least a little damp. Leather boots, hopefully still holding together. Sometimes fur, if he owned such a thing. Not everyone did. He might have a blanket, or a thick cloak used as a blanket, or nothing extra at all. In that case, he would rely on lying close to others, not because he wanted to socialize, but because humans produce heat, and heat is valuable. People often imagine Vikings as solitary and dramatic, but at night, they were packed together like tools in a chest. Not touching would have been considered wasteful. So he finds a space, maybe on a bench, maybe on the floor, maybe wedged between a barrel and someone who snores. He arranges his cloak under him if he is one. Not for softness. For dryness, wood collects moisture. Cold comes up from below. The cloak is a small barrier between his body and the idea of freezing. He lies down, or more accurately, he bends himself into a shape that fits. Longships were narrow. There was not much room to stretch out, so people slept curled, on their side knees pulled up, arms tucked in, a shape that kept warmth inside and took up less space. And then he closes his eyes, but sleeping on a longship was not like sleeping in a bed. Beds stay still. Longships do not. The ship moves. Always. Even when anchored. The water shifts. The hull rocks. Gently. Sometimes not gently. Sometimes like it is bored and wants to throw you off. So sleep was shallow. You learned to drift in and out. To accept that your body would be woken by motion. By noise. By someone stepping over you. By a sudden gust of wind. By spray hitting your face, and you did not complain. Because complaining did not make the ship stop. You simply adjusted. Again. And again. Now consider the cold. Cold at sea is different from cold on land. On land, you can hide behind things. Trees. Walls. Hills. On a longship, the wind has opinions about your comfort, and those opinions are not kind. The air is wet. Wet air steals heat faster than dry air. The wind pulls warmth from your clothes, from your skin, from your breath. Even inside wool, you feel it. So sailors layered. Whatever they had, they wore. Tunic over tunic if possible. Cloak over shoulders, hood pulled up. Some wrapped cloth around their feet. Some tucked their feet under someone else's legs without asking. When lying down, many curled tightly. Not because it was comfortable, but because it trapped heat. Knees to chest, arms crossed, chin tucked down, like a person trying to fold into themselves. If someone had fur, that person became popular. People would try to sleep near the fur owner, not because they liked him, but because fur was warm. Sometimes two people would share a cloak, one on each side, like a human sandwich. No romance, just survival. And still, cold crept in. Fingers stiffened. Toes went numb, ears hurt. In that quiet way, cold causes. You would wake up not because you were rested, but because your body wanted you to move and make heat. So, you shifted. Rolled. Pulled your cloak tighter. Pressed closer to someone who sighed but did not move away. Eventually, you drifted off again. Sleep came in pieces. Never all at once. Now imagine doing this for days, or weeks. Long voyages were not quick. Sailing from Scandinavia to Britain could take several days. To Iceland, much longer. To Greenland, even more. And all that time, nights came, and each night meant the same ritual of finding a place to lie down and hoping it was not worse than last night. There was no mattress, no pillow, unless you counted a rolled cloak or a bag of clothes. No ceilings. The ship creaked. The ropes hummed. The sail flapped. The water slapped against the hull in steady, patient rhythms. Some people found that soothing, like a strange wooden lullaby. Others never got used to it, but humans adapt. Slowly, quietly. without ceremony. After a few nights, your body learned that this was what bed meant now. Wood under you, wind around you, movement, always. It stopped complaining so loudly, not because it was happy, but because it realized this was not changing, and people developed routines. Before sleeping, sailors might eat. Not a big meal, just enough. Dried fish, bread, cheese, something dense. Eating helps you feel warmer, not because the food is hot, but because digestion makes heat, so a full stomach is a warmer one. Then they would drink. Not too much. Ale or mead if they had it, mostly weakale. Not strong enough to get truly drunk, but enough to take the edge off. Cold and stiffness, enough to make the body relax. Then people would slowly lie down. No announcement. No bedtime bell, just one person deciding they were done being upright. Then another, then more. Someone might still be on watch. Standing, wrapped in a cloak, staring into dark water. That person would sleep later. The ones lying down tried to make their space. There were no rules except do not push someone into the sea. You put your cloak down. You turn sideways. You pull your knees in. You place your head on whatever is least uncomfortable. A bag, a rolled rope. Your arm, someone else's arm, if they did not object. Then you breathe, and you let the boat carry you. Now, not every night was freezing. Summer voyages existed. Warm days happened, but even then nights at sea were cool and damp. Always damp. Sometimes rain fell, then everything became wet. Clothes, cloaks, hair, wood. You could not dry things easily on a boat. So you slept wet, not soaked like falling in, but wet like fog that never leaves. Wet clothes feel heavier, colder. They cling. They smell, but sailors got used to that too. Smell was not a big concern. Everyone smelled of sweat, of wool, of salt, of fish, of old smoke. No one expected anything else. Sleep was about function, not comfort. Now and then, if the ship stopped near land for the night, things improved slightly. They might pull the ship onto shore, light a small fire, dry clothes, sleep on the ground instead of wood, which was still not soft, but at least it did not move. But sometimes staying at sea was safer than landing, or faster, or simply easier. So many nights were spent floating, rocking, drifting in and out of shallow sleep. Children sometimes traveled too. Families moved. Traders brought sons or nephews. Those children slept like everyone else, curled up, cold, quiet, learning early that the world does not come with pillows. And older men slept too, stiffer, slower to get up, taking longer to find a place that did not hurt too much. No one got special treatment. Not really. Even leaders slept in the same space, maybe near the center. Maybe with a slightly better cloak, but still on wood. Still in the wind. The sea does not care who you are. And so each night, Vikings on Longships repeated this simple, unimpressive ritual. Find space. Make it slightly less awful. Close your eyes. Wake up cold. Adjust. Sleep again. Over time, this became normal. Not good. Not pleasant. Just normal. They did not write poems about it. They did not carve runes about how their back hurt. They accepted it the way people accept weather. Because if you want to go places by sea in the north, this is the price. And while we often imagine Vikings standing tall, cloaks flying dramatically, the truth is that most of their time was spent bent. Bent to row. Bent to work. Bent to asleep. Curled into themselves against wind and wood, quietly waiting for morning. And when morning came, it did not come gently. Someone would need to move. Someone would step over someone else. Someone would accidentally kick a leg. Someone would cough. The watch would change. The ship would shift. Eyes would open, slowly, blinking against gray light, against mist, against whatever kind of day had decided to exist. People would sit up, groan quietly, stretch as much as the space allowed, which was not much, rub hands together to wake fingers, blow on them, stomp feet carefully so as not to stomp on someone else's face. Then it was time to do it all again. Row, watch, sail, drift, and eventually find a place to lie down once more. And while that quietly carried on, the ship moved forward. Through cold water, under wide sky, carrying people who slept in pieces, dreamed in fragments, and called this life, not because it was comfortable, but because it was the only one that went where they wanted to go. Chapter 2. Nights when the sea does not cooperate. Some nights were calm. Those were the easy ones. The ship rocked gently, like it was trying not to wake anyone on purpose. But the sea did not promise to behave every night. And when it didn't, sleep became less like resting and more like negotiating. Wind could change without warning. A quiet evening could turn restless. The sail would start to talk louder, not shouting, just complaining, flapping in that uneven way that suggests it is not happy with its job. The hoe would answer with creaks, wood, rubbing against wood, old sounds, familiar sounds, but louder than before. People lying down would feel it first in their stomachs, that small, floating feeling, like when the ground forgets how to stay still. Someone would open an eye, then close it again, hoping the feeling would pass. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. When waves grew stronger, the ship lifted and dropped more clearly. Up, then down, then sideways a little, just to be annoying. Bodies rolled slightly. Someone's knee pressed into someone else's ribs. Someone muttered a quiet complaint that went nowhere. You could not stretch out and balance. There was not enough space. So you curled tighter. Like making yourself smaller might make the sea ignore you. Cold felt sharper when the ship moved more. Wind cut harder. Spray sometimes reached over the side and landed wherever it wanted. On cloaks, on faces, on open eyes. Getting wet at night was especially unpleasant. During the day, you could at least move around and warm up. At night, you were lying still, trying not to shiver too loudly. If spray hit your face, you wiped it away with your sleeve, which only made your sleeve wetter, which made your arm colder. But you still did it, because salt water in the ice makes sleep impossible. Sometimes, rain came too. Not dramatic rain, just steady, stubborn rain. The kind that does not care how long it stays. There was no roof, no walls. Some ships carried cloth covers that could be stretched over part of the deck, but not always, and not perfectly. Wind always found a way in. So rain meant everything slowly becoming damp again. Hair, cloaks, wood, the air itself. People pulled cloaks tighter. Some turned their backs to the wind. Some tried to angle themselves so water ran off instead of pooling in folds of cloth. You learned small tricks, like how to tilt your shoulders so rain followed the cloak downward instead of into your neck. But none of it stopped the cold entirely. Sleep in bad weather became shorter, more broken. You would drift off, then wake when the ship lurched. Drift again, then wake when someone shifted suddenly to avoid sliding into you. Drift again, then wake when cold finally reached some new part of you that had not complained yet. Your dreams, if they came at all, were thin and strange. Half-built images, a memory of land, a memory of warmth, then nothing. No deep rest, just pauses. Sometimes, when the weather was bad enough, people did not even bother trying to sleep much. They would sit, lean against ribs of the ship, wrap cloaks around themselves and wait, not fully awake, not fully asleep, just existing until the sea decided to calm down. Someone always had to be watching, especially in bad weather. Watching waves, watching sail, watching for trouble. That person stayed standing, mobbing slowly shifting weight. keeping blood flowing so they did not freeze into the deck. That person would sleep later, or not much at all. Everyone knew that some nights would be like this. You did not curse them loudly. You accepted them quietly. Now and then, someone would get seasick. Even experienced sailors were not immune. Cold and motion and empty stomachs did not help. If someone was sick, they leaned over the side and did what needed doing. No one commented. No one mocked. Everyone had been there, or would be. Afterwards, that person would wipe their mouth, look tired, and try to lie down again. Maybe someone would shift to give them a slightly better spot. Maybe not. It depended on how generous everyone felt that night. Generosity existed, but it was tired. Sometimes people talked quietly before sleeping. Not stories, just small talk. Complaints about cold, about hands that would not warm, about boots that still leaked, about how much longer until land. The answers were often vague. Soon, someone might say, no one knew exactly what Sue meant. Talking stopped when people realized it was not making them warmer. Then there was just sound. Wind, water, wood, breathing. And everyone waited for morning. Morning, when it came, did not care how badly you slept. Work still needed doing. Oars still needed pulling. Sails still needed watching. So people got up anyway. They always did. But this chapter is about night, so let's stay there. Imagine a sailor named nothing in particular. He is not famous. No saga will remember him. He is just a man with cold hands. He lies on his side, knees pulled up. His cloak is damp now, not soaked, but heavy. He can feel the cold through it. He tucks his chin into his chest, breathing into his own wool, trying to make a pocket of warm air. The ship rolls. He presses his back into the bench so he doesn't slide. His hip is on wood. It aches a little. It always aches a little. Someone behind him snores softly. Not loudly. Just a steady sound. In another life, it might be comforting. Here it is, just another noise. Wind pushes at the sail. The sail answers. Flap. Then quieter. Then flap again. He closes his eyes. He thinks of land. Not in any special way, just the idea of stillness. Ground that does not move. Walls that block wind. Fire that stays where you put it. Then his foot goes numb. He shifts, slowly, carefully, so he does not wake the man in front of him. He pulls his foot closer to his body. He tucks it under his other leg. He feels pins and needles as blood comes back. It hurts for a moment, then fades. He breathes out, slowly. Sleep comes again. Light. Thin. Like a blanket with too many holes. He dreams of walking, just walking. No waves. No rocking. Just step after step on something solid. Then the ship dips hard, and his head bumps gently into the bench above him. Not enough to hurt. Enough to wake him. He opens his eyes to darkness and gray. He blinks. He sighs. He does not get angry. Anger takes energy. He just closes his eyes again. This is how nights pass. Sometimes someone gets truly cold. Not just uncomfortable, but shivering hard. Teeth clicking quietly. Shoulders shaking. When that happened, people noticed, because shivering spreads through bodies pressed together. One person's shaking makes another move. If someone is cold enough, someone else might shift to share more warmth. Press closer. Pull a cloak over both of them. Not out of kindness exactly, but because it is practical. Two bodies are warmer than one, sometimes more than two. People formed small piles. Not neat, just shapes of people leaning into each other, making a shared barrier against wind. No one talked about it. It just happened. But not every night needed piles. Some nights were only mildly cold. Some were quiet enough that sleep came more easily. On those nights, dreams lasted longer. People sank deeper. Breathing slowed. Bodies relaxed more fully. And on those nights, waking up felt strange, because for a moment, you forgot where you were. You might wake thinking you were at home, in a bed, on dry ground. Then you'd feel the movement, smell the sea, ere they sail. And remember, memory returns slowly, like light. Now and then, someone had a nightmare. Not loud, just restless movement. A sharp breath, a sudden shift. Nightmares were not traumatic either. Mostly about falling, about being lost, about waves too big, about fire, about things you could not escape. If someone thrashed too much, someone else might put a hand on their shoulder. Not to comfort, to stop them from hitting people. The dreamer would wake, confused, quiet, embarrassed, then lie still again. No one teased them. Everyone had dreams. As the hours passed, cold settled deeper. The cold of night is heavier than the cold of evening. It sinks into wood, into cloth, into skin. You could feel it in your joints, knees, fingers, neck. It made everything stiff. Some people slept with their hands between their thighs or under their armpits to keep them warmer. Some slept with fists pressed into their stomachs. Faces were often half covered. Cloaks pulled up over noses, breath turning into little clouds that vanished quickly. Stars sometimes showed above. Sometimes clouds hid everything. But few people watched the sky at night, unless they had to. Staring up did not make you warmer. Sue's eyes stayed closed. Time moved slowly. Not because it actually slowed, but because when you are cold and tired, every minute feels like it takes more effort to pass. You did not count hours. You counted moments of discomfort. One cold foot, one stiff shoulder, one cramped knee. Each adjustment was a small event. You learned to adjust quietly. Loud movement at night annoyed people. Not because they wanted silence, but because noise meant someone was stepping on someone else or shaking the ship more than necessary. So movements were slow, careful, like you were always trying not to wake a sleeping animal, even though the sleeping animal was probably already awake. Now, sometimes someone would not sleep at all. Maybe they were too cold, or too worried, or just unlucky. They would lie there, eyes open, staring into dark, listening, feeling. Those nights were long. Your mind wanders more when your body is still. You think about things you don't usually have time for. Home, food, old mistakes, people you miss, things you never said. You also think about very small things, like how your boot rubs your ankle, or how your nose is cold, but your back is sweaty. These thoughts are not deep. They just pass time. Eventually, even those who could not sleep might drift for a few minutes. Not real sleep, just a blank space where thinking stops. Then something wakes them. Wind, motion, a voice, a cough, and it starts again. But morning always comes, even if you feel like it shouldn't. You can sense it before you see it. The air changes. The dark becomes less heavy. Shapes start to exist again. People begin to move more. Not all at once. One sits up, then another. Someone stretches and regrets it immediately. Someone on watch announces something quietly. Maybe land. Maybe nothing. Maybe just that it's time to change. People rise from the floor like old men, even if they are young. Stiff, slow, rubbing eyes, rubbing hands together. Sleepy sober, not because they are rested, but because the night is done with them, and the day is ready to take its turn. Chapter 3. Small habits that made night survivable. People who sleep badly for long enough start to invent rules for themselves. Not written rules, just habits that quietly improve things by a very small amount. Viking sailors did the same. Over time, They learned little ways to make night less difficult. Not good. Whose less bad one habit was choosing where to lie down. Not all spots in a longship were equally unpleasant. Some were only moderately unpleasant. Near the center of the ship, movement was gentler. The ends of the ship rose and fell more, so experienced sailors often aimed for the middle if they could. But the middle was also where cargo sat, so you had to compete with barrels, chests, sacks, and whatever else the ship was carrying. If you arrived late to sleeping, you got whatever space was left, which often meant near the ends, where the rocking felt more like being inside a bowl someone was slowly tipping back and forth. So people learned to lie down early if they wanted a better place. Not because they were tired, but because space was. Another habit involved what you put under yourself. If you had anything soft, you saved it for night. A spare tunic, a bag of clothes, a rolled cloak, even rope, coiled thickly, could make wood feel less sharp. Some sailors carried small mats of woven grass or reeds. Not luxurious, just something between skin and plank. Those were valuable. People guarded them carefully. If you had nothing, you learned to use your own body as padding, lying on your side instead of your back, keeping hips and shoulders from pressing too hard into wood. Some people switched sides halfway through the night, not because they were awake enough to think about it, but because pain quietly forced them to. Another habit was how you dressed for sleep. You did not undress much, not like modern people do. You might remove wet outer layers if they were truly soaked, but often you slept in what you wore. But you adjusted. You loosened belts so they didn't dig into your stomach. You pulled boots off if they were too stiff or cold, but you kept them nearby so they didn't freeze solid by morning. Some slept with boots on, especially if they were worried about needing to move quickly. Boots were hard to put on with numb fingers. Hoods were important. A lot of heat escapes from the head, so people pulled hoods tight or wrapped cloaks around their heads like awkward hats. If you had extra cloth, you wrapped it around your feet. Feet got cold first. Cold feet kept you awake. Hands too. Some slept with hands tucked into sleeves. Others folded arms across their chest and slid hands under armpits. It looked uncomfortable. It was. But it worked. Breathing was another small habit. People learned to breathe into their cloaks. Not deeply. Just enough that warm breath stayed near their face. It made a tiny warm pocket. If you pulled your cloak too high, your breath would wet it. Then it would get cold, so you had to balance warmth and dryness. Too little cover, you freeze. Too much, you soak yourself. People learned that balance slowly by being uncomfortable many times. Another habit involved who you slept near. Some people gave off more heat than others. Bigger bodies, thicker clothes, more layers. You noticed who stayed warm, and you tried, quietly, to be near them. But you also noticed who moved a lot, who kicked who turned suddenly, who snored loudly. You tried to avoid those if you could. There were no assigned sleeping partners. But patterns formed. The same people often ended up near each other, not because they were friends, but because their sleeping styles did not fight. One man slept like stone. Never moved. People liked sleeping near him. Another flailed in his sleep. People avoided him. No one told him directly. They just stopped lying near him. Another habit was what you did before lying down. If you went to sleep cold, you stayed cold. So people tried to get warm first. They moved, stamped feet, rubbed hands, sometimes did a little work before sleeping, just to build heat. Carry something, add Worcester, rope, anything. Then, while warm, they lay down quickly and tried to trap that heat. Food helped too, not heavy food, but something. People saved a bit of bread or fish for night if they could. Eating before sleeping helped keep you warmer longer. Drinking helped a little too. But too much made you careless. You might forget to pull your cloak tight. You might fall asleep before finding a good spot. Then you paid for it later. So most people drank just enough to feel slightly less tense. Some people sang quietly before sleep. Not loud songs, more like murmuring. Old tunes. Simple words. It wasn't entertainment. It was comfort. Something familiar in an unfamiliar place. Others preferred silence. Some liked listening to the ship, the steady sounds. Creak. Splash. Flap. Those sounds meant the ship was still doing its job. Silence at sea could be worrying. Silence sometimes meant trouble. So, familiar noise became part of sleeping. People also learned how to place their bodies to resist movement. If you lay across the ship instead of along it, the rocking felt worse. So you lay along the length of the ship, head toward one end, feet toward the other. That way, when the ship rose and fell, it felt more like a slow lift than a roll. You also pressed parts of yourself against something solid. A bench, a rib, cargo. That gave your body a point of contact so it didn't slide. Some slept with one arm hooked around a bench leg or rope. Not tight. Just enough to feel anchored. Children often slept pressed against adults. Not always their parents, just whoever was nearby and warm. Older sailors often chose spots where they could get up easily near the edge. Near a bench, so they didn't have to climb over too many people in the morning. Another habit involved waking. People learned to wake slowly. If you moved too fast, dizziness came. Stiff joints complained loudly. So people sat up first, waited, let blood move, then they stood. If they stood too fast, the world tilted, and falling over in a longship in the morning is embarrassing. So you learned patience. There were also habits about drying things. If the day had been wet and the night calm, people sometimes laid cloaks and clothes over ropes or benches to dry a little while they slept. Not much, but a little. If it rained at night, you gave up on drying and just accepted damp. People rotated clothes too. If one tunic was very wet, you might wear another at night if you had it, and let the wet one dry on your body the next day. Not pleasant, but workavli. Some people even slept in shifts with their cloaks. One used it for part of the night, then passed it to someone colder. That did not happen often, but it happened. Now and then, someone would be generous. Truly generous. They would give their better cloak to someone who was struggling. An older man, a child, somo, seek. That person would sleep warmer. The giver would sleep colder, but maybe they felt better about it. Or maybe they just didn't like watching someone suffer. These moments were quiet. No speeches. No praise. Just a cloak changing shoulders in the dark. Small kindnesses mattered more at night than during the day. During the day, everyone was busy. At night, you noticed who was cold. Another habit involved dealing with pain. Wooden planks are not forgiving, so people learned to shift often. Not constantly, just enough. If your hip hurt, you rolled slightly. If your shoulder hurt, you moved your arm. If your neck hurt, you used your hand as a pillow. Some people slept better, curled tight. Others needed a little stretch, but space rarely allowed full comfort. So pain was accepted as part of sleep. Over time, your body changed. Muscles adapted. Bones accepted pressure differently. What once felt sharp became familiar. Not pleasant, but tolerable. This is how humans survive many things. Not by loving them, but by getting used to them. Now think about how many nights like this a sailor experienced. Dozens. Hundreds. Over years. Sleep became something thin and functional, enough to keep going. Not enough to feel truly rested. People did not talk about being tired all the time. Te hustweri. And when someone reached land and slept on the ground near a fire, or in a hole, or in a barn, that sleep felt deep. Heavy. Like falling into a hole. Some sailors said they dreamed more on land. Maybe because they finally slept long enough for dreams to finish forming. But even then some missed the ship's movement. They had grown used to it. Stillness felt strange. They would lie on solid ground and feel like they were floating. Their bodies had learned the sea. And at night, even in beds, some would still curl as if on wood. Still tuck their chin. Still listen for wind. Habits. Stay. So when we think of Vikings, It is easy to imagine loud halls and roaring fires. But much of their life was spent like this, quiet, curled, cold, learning small habits that made nights survivable. Not heroic habits, just human ones. Chapter 4. Sleeping when land is nearby but not quite there. Some nights were spent close to land, not on it. Just near enough that you could smell it. Damp earth, trees, smoke from someone else's fire far away. Those smells meant you were almost somewhere. Almost is not the same as there. When a ship anchored near shore, the water often grew calmer. Waves broke themselves on sand or rocks before reaching the hull. The ship still moved, but less. Rocking turned into slow swaying. That made sleeping easier. Slightly, but being near land brought its own problems. Wind sometimes funneled differently near cliffs or forests. It could swirl, change direction, sneak under cloaks from new angles, and the air near land could be colder at night, especially in valleys or near rivers. Cold settles in low places, so a ship near shore could feel colder than one out in open water. Some crews chose to land if they could, but not always. Sometimes the shore was rocky or swampy or claimed by people who did not want visitors. Sometimes it was dark and hard to judge. Landing in the dark could damage a ship, and no one wanted to explain that in the morning. So they stayed on the water, close enough to smell land, but not touch it. That kind of night was strange. You could hear things. Birds settling. Water moving differently. Insects, sometimes, if it was warm enough. Sounds that did not belong to open sea. Those sounds reminded people of home, or of somewhere they once lived. It made some feel calmer. It made others restless. You might lie there listening to frogs or birds and think of fields, or forests, or nights by a hearth. Then the ship would creak, and you would remember you were not there. Sleep near land often came in longer pieces, because movement was gentler. But people woke more easily to sounds. A branch scraping water. A fish jumping. A distant shout. A strange echo. When you are close to land, you have more to worry about. On open sea, danger comes mostly from weather. Near land, it can come from people. So someone always watched carefully. That person listened to 2 voices, 2 steps, to anything that sounded like someone approaching. The rest slept, but lighter than usual. Not because they chose to, but because part of the mind stays alert when you are close to unknown ground. If someone heard something strange, they might wake another person quietly. No shouting. Just a touch, a whisper. Often it was nothing. Just water. Just animals. Just the night. Being a night. Then they lay down again. Sometimes ships anchored near villages they planned to visit in the morning. Traders, allies, people who might or might not be friendly. Sleeping near such places felt tense. In a quiet way. You were almost there. The work of arrival had not begun yet, but your body was already thinking about it. You might think about what you would do tomorrow, what you would trade, who you might meet, whether someone would recognize you, whether you would recognize them. Those thoughts kept some people awake. Others did not care. They were too tired to plan. Tomorrow would happen, whether they thought about it or not. If the shore was friendly, sometimes small boats came out. Fishermen, curious, children watching, dogs barking. Those noises drifted across water at night in strange ways. A small sound could travel far. A distant voice could sound close. That made sleep uneven. You would wake, thinking someone was near, then realize they were far. You would relax, then hear another sound. Near land, darkness felt more full, more crowded. At sea, darkness is mostly empty. Near land, darkness hides many things, so people kept weapons near at night when close to shore. Not in hand, just within reach. A spear beside you. a knife under your cloak, a shield near your head if there was room. You slept with one part of your mind knowing where your weapon was. That part never fully slept. Now, imagine lying there. You can smell trees, you hear insects, you hear water against sand. The ship moves only a little. You almost feel like you are not on a ship at all. Almost. Then the hull creaks, or a rope tightens, or someone shifts, and you remember. Sleep comes in waves, like the water. Some nights, fog rolled in near shore. Thick fog, the kind that makes the world small. Fog is schiatti. It eats sound. It makes everything softer, but also more uncertain. You cannot see land. You cannot see water. You cannot see much of anything. Just gray. That made some people uneasy. Being blind while floating is not comforting, but fog also blocked wind, which made nights warmer, so people were torn between liking it and not trusting it. Sleeping in fog felt like sleeping inside a cloud, everything muffled. Breathing felt heavier, cloaks stayed damp. Dreams in foggy nights were often strange, because the world already felt like a dream. People dreamed of walking in mist, of calling and not being heard, of shapes that never fully formed. When morning came, fog sometimes stayed. The world remained gray. People moved quietly, as if noise might break something. But again, this is morning. We are still in night. Near land, sometimes fires were visible. Small points of light on hills or in villages. You could lie there, watching a fire far away, flickering. That tiny light felt important. Someone else was awake. Someone else was warm. You might wonder who they were, what they were doing, whether they could see you too. Probably not. Firelight looks different across water. It stretches. It wobbles. It looks like it is moving when it isn't. Staring at it made eyes tired. Some people liked to watch, until they fell asleep. Others turned away. Looking at warmth you cannot reach is not always helpful. On nights near land, smells changed. Less salt, more plants, more smoke, sometimes animals. Smell is powerful. It brings memory faster than sight. A man might smell wet leaves and think of a forest where he hunted once, or of a road he walked as a child, or of a place he had not thought about in years. Those memories were quiet, not stories, whose feelings they might make him sad, or calm, or nothing at all. Then the ship would move, and the smell would change again. Some nights, crews decided to go ashore even in the dark, if the place was known. If the shore was safe, then sleeping changed completely. You slept on ground, on grass, on sand, on rocks. That was still uncomfortable. But at least it did not move. People would build small fires. Dry cloaks, warm hands. Then sleep came deeper, heavier. But sometimes, sleeping on land made people feel strange. They had grown used to the ship. They felt the still. Some would wake thinking they were falling because the ground was not moving. Hobbits thought, but many nights, they stayed on the ship, close to the land, but not touching it. Those nights were in-between nights. Not sea nights, not land nights, something in the middle. Sleep in those nights was also in the middle. Not as broken as rough sea nights. Not as deep as fire and ground nights. Just steady. Uneven. Quiet. People lay there listening to a world that had more sounds than the open sea, but fewer than a village. They smelled places they were not yet in. They dreamed of things they were about to do. And when morning came, land was closer. Or not. Sometimes they drifted farther than expected. Either way, they rose. Stiff, cold, quiet. 'Cause night had finished with them. And the ship, as always, was ready to keep going. Chapter 5. Sleeping during long journeys that never seemed to end. Some voyages felt endless, not because they truly were, but because days at sea all looked the same. Water, sky, wood, wind. When every day looks like yesterday, the mind stops keeping careful count. On those journeys, nights blurred together too. One cold night felt like another. You stopped remembering specific ones. You just remembered that you were often cold and often tired. Sleep became routine. Not special, just another task. Like rowing or watching, people learned to fall asleep faster. Not deeply, but quickly. When you are tired enough, your body does not wait for comfort. You lie down. You close your eyes. You rest. Whether it is good rest is a different question. On long journeys, people often slept in shifts, not formal ones, with bells and rules. Just agreed patterns. Some slept early, some slept late. Some napped during calm hours. A sailor might sleep for 2 or 3 hours, then wake and work, then sleep again later. Sleep became something you collected in small amounts, like gathering water in small cups instead of one big pot. Your dreams changed too. They became shorter, less detailed. Sometimes you did not remember them at all. You would wake knowing you had dreamed, but not what about, like waking from a room you cannot describe. People also talked less on long journeys, not because they were angry, because there was nothing new to say. You can only comment on the same water so many times, so nights were quiet. Just breathing. Just wood. Just sea. Sometimes people counted things to fall asleep. Not numbers, exactly, but strokes of oars remembered. Or days since leaving. Or meals eaten. Some counted waves. But waves do not like being counted. They forget what number they are on. People thought about food a lot. What they missed, what they would eat first when they arrived. Dreams often included food. Big bread, fresh meat, warm soup, things you could not have on a ship. Waking from those dreams was disappointing. On long journeys, bodies changed. People lost weight, or gained it, depending on food. Muscles ached differently. Skin grew rough. Sleep was part of that change. Light sleep made everything feel slower, heavy, like you were always one step behind. People grew quiet, not sad, just slow. Sometimes someone would get sick, fever, cough, weakness. That person would sleep more, or try to. They would be given the best spot possible. More cloaks, more space. Others would move to make room. Grumbling quietly, but moving. A sick person slept differently, more deeply at times. Or not at all. At others, people listened to their breathing at night, counting breaths without meaning to, wondering if they would change. Most of the time, sickness passed. Sometimes it did not, but this is not a story about dying. It is a story about sleeping. So we stay with the ordinary. On long journeys, you stopped noticing small discomforts. They blended together. Cold, hard wood, damp cloth, hunger, stiffness. They became one general feeling of this is how it is. Only big discomforts stood out. Truly cold nights. Truly rough seas. Truly bad weather. Other nights faded into sameness.
Some sailors carved small things during long journeys. Pieces of wood. Bones. Little shapes. They worked during the day. At night, they slept holding these things, not because they meant anything special, but because they were there. Hands like to hold things. Some sailors kept small personal objects. A stone from home. A bit of cloth. A piece of jewelry. They slept with those near their chest or under their head. Like a pillow of memory. Not because it made them warmer, but because it made them feel less far away. On long journeys, homesickness arrived quietly. It did not shout. It just sat with you. At night, when everything was slow, homesickness spoke more clearly. You might remember a door, a tree, a field, a face. Not dramatic memories, just ordinary ones. Those memories made sleep strange. You would fall asleep thinking of one place and wake in another. It felt like being between worlds. Some people liked that feeling. Others did not. You could not escape it either way. Time at sea changes how you think. Days become less important than weather. Nights become more important than names of places. You stop thinking, "It is Tuesday," and start thinking, "It is cold," or "It is calm," or "It is windy." So when you lie down at night, you are not thinking of dates. You are thinking of how tired you are and how cold you feel. You are thinking of whether your cloak is dry enough. You are thinking of where your boots are. And that is enough. Long journeys also made people dream about the sea itself. Not storms. Just water. People dreamed of floating. Of sinking slowly. Of standing on water that did not break. They dreamed of boats that did not move. They dreamed of sleeping on water like it was ground. These dreams were not frightening. They were quiet. You would wake feeling like you had been somewhere else that looked exactly like where you were. Some nights, people laughed in their sleep. Just small sounds. Not jokes. Just breath that came out wrong. Others cried softly. Without waking. Tears that came and went. No one mentioned it in the morning. Sleep belongs to the night. On long journeys, people forgot what a good night's sleep felt like. They forgot the weight of deep rest. When they finally reached land and slept in a bed or on thick grass, the first night felt heavy. They would sleep too long. Wake confused. Not knowing where they were. They would feel warm and strange and stiff. Some would wake in fear because the bed did not move. They would think the ship had stopped sinking. Then they would remember. But during the journey, they did not know that night would ever feel like that again. They just knew that tonight would be like last night. Cold. Quiet. Unimpressive. And they would lie down anyway. Because the ship did not stop. And neither did the nights. Chapter 6. When sleep and waking begin to look the same. After enough nights like this, something strange happens. The line between sleeping and waking gets thin. Not gone. Just blurry. You lie down, but part of you stays awake. You wake, but part of you still feels asleep. Your body moves before you think. You reach for your cloak without deciding to. You curl your knees without noticing. You breathe into your wool without remembering when you learned to do that. Sleep becomes a habit more than a state. You can be asleep and still know where you are. You can be awake and still feel like you are drifting. Some sailors could fall asleep sitting up, leaning against a rib, head tipped forward, mouth open slightly. They would sleep like that for minutes, then wake, then sleep again. They did not remember falling asleep. They just remembered waking. Night and day began to feel similar. Both involved work. Both involved cold. Both involved wood and water. The only real difference was light. People started to lose track of how long they had been awake. You might think you slept a long time, then realize it had only been a short while. Or think you barely slept, then realize you had slept more than you thought. Memory gets strange when rest is thin. Dreams also changed. They became mixed with real sounds. You might dream of waves because you were hearing waves. You might dream of wind because wind was already there. Sometimes you dreamed you were still awake. And when you woke, you were not sure if you had been dreaming or thinking. Some people talked in their sleep. Not full sentences. Just words. Names. Places. Sounds that meant something to them but nothing to others. If someone said your name in their sleep, you noticed. You wondered why. But you never asked? Dreams are private. Some sailors developed little rituals to tell themselves they were awake. They would touch something. The bench. Their knife. Their boots. If they could feel it, they were awake. Then they would lie down and let that feeling fade. Sometimes people woke and forgot where they were for a moment. They would try to stand like they were in a house and nearly fall. They would grab something. Someone would steady them. No one laughed. Everyone had been confused at least once. This kind of life makes the body learn faster than the mind. The body learns the ship. The mind follows slowly. You learn how to move without falling, how to step without looking, how to shift without waking others. You also learn how to sleep without truly sleeping. Your eyes close, but your ears stay open. Your muscles relax, but not fully. You are ready to move even in sleep. That is not peaceful. But it is useful. Animals sleep like that too. In places where danger is possible. People at sea slept like animals in that way. Light. Ready. After weeks like this, deep sleep felt unfamiliar. Almost unsafe. Some sailors said that when they slept too deeply, they dreamed of falling or drowning. Their bodies did not trust deep stillness anymore. So they learned to stay near the surface of sleep. This made nights feel long. But days felt long too. Everything felt long. Yet time still passed. One night you lie down and think, "This is just like last night." Another night, you cannot remember what last night felt like. They blur. You stop marking nights as events. They are just spaces between days. The only nights you remember clearly are the very bad ones. Or the very calm ones. Most are forgotten. But while they are happening, they are very real. You feel every plank. Every draft of air. Every movement. You feel your body slowly learning to live like this. This kind of tired changes you. You become slower to react, but also calmer. You do not rush. Rushing wastes energy. You speak less. You think less. You simply do what needs doing. At night you lie down because it is time to lie down. You close your eyes because they are heavy. You wake because something moved or someone touched you or light arrived. You do not ask why. Sometimes you wake and realize you were already awake. Your eyes were closed, but your mind was not gone. You might have been listening to the ship for a long time without knowing it. The ship's sounds become part of you. You recognize each creak, each groan, each slap of water. If a sound is wrong, you know. Even in sleep. Then you wake fully. But most of the time, sounds are right. And you stay in that half place between sleeping and waking. Some sailors said that in that half place, they felt closest to the ship. Like they were part of it. They could feel its movement in their bones. They could feel when it leaned into a wave. They could feel when it slowed. They did not need to see. They knew. That kind of knowing comes from long nights. From many hours lying still while the world moves around you. From letting your body learn what your eyes cannot always see. So sleep becomes a kind of listening. Not with ears only, but with skin, with muscle, with breath. You listen to cold. To motion. To wind. And in that listening you rest. Not deeply. But enough. Always just enough. Until morning comes again and asks you to move. And you do. Because you always do. Chapter 7. The quiet thoughts that come only at night. Night on a longship is when thoughts slow down enough to be heard. During the day, hands are busy. Eyes are busy. You row, you watch, you fix, you carry. There is no room for many thoughts. But at night, when you lie still, thoughts have space. They do not rush in. They drift. You might think of small things first. How your shoulder hurts. How your cloak smells. How your boot is rubbing again. These are easy thoughts. They belong to your body. Then other thoughts arrive. Ones that belong to your past. You might remember a path near your home. How it bends near a stone. How grass grows thinner there. You have not thought of that path in years, but now it is clear. You might remember someone's laugh. Not the sound, but the shape of it. How their face looked when they laughed. You do not know why you remember it now. Night does that. It opens doors you did not plan to open. Some people thought about mistakes at night. Things they said wrong. Things they did not say. Choices that brought them here instead of somewhere else. Those thoughts were not loud. They did not argue. They just sat with you. You might think, if I had stayed, I would be sleeping in a bed now. Then you would think, but I am here. And that would be the end of it. Night does not fix things. It just shows them. Some people thought about people they missed. Children. Parents, friends, lovers. They wondered what those people were doing right now. Were they asleep? Were they warm? Were they thinking of them too? Most likely, they were not. But that did not stop the wondering. These thoughts did not make people cry often. They made people quiet. Crying takes energy. Most sailors did not have extra energy at night. They just lay there, feeling those thoughts like a second kind of cold. Sometimes those thoughts made sleep harder. Sometimes they made it easier. Thinking of someone could be comforting, like holding a memory close to stay warm. Sometimes people whispered names into the dark. Not loudly. Just to hear the sound once. No one answered. But saying it still mattered. Some people thought about death. Not in a dramatic way. Just as a fact. They thought, if I die at sea, where will I be? Not in a religious sense. Just in a practical one. Your body in water. Your things on a ship. Your name in a few people's mouths for a short time. Then they stopped thinking about it. Because thinking about it did not change anything. Others thought about money. About what they hoped to gain. Silver. Land. A better life. They counted imaginary coins. They planned imaginary days. Then the ship moved, and those plans faded. Night makes plans feel thin. Some people thought about nothing. They lay there and let their minds go quiet. That was harder than it sounds. Quiet is not empty. It is full of small things. Breathing. Wind. Wood. Distant water. If you listen too closely, your mind fills with those sounds. Then you are not quiet at all. But some people learned to drift between thought and sound. Not holding either. They rested there. Those people slept better. Children thought different things. They thought about games. About animals. About food. About stories they had heard. They thought about where they were going and what it would look like. They were less burdened by memory. They had less behind them. Old people thought more about what was already done. Less about what might be. They thought about how their bodies felt now compared to before. How things that were once easy were now slow. They thought about whether they would see certain places again. Night brings different thoughts to different ages. But everyone thought more at night than during the day. Because the day demands your attention. Night invites it. Some nights, thoughts came like a slow river. One after another. Calm. Other nights, they came like scattered leaves. No order. Just movement. And some nights, no thoughts came at all. Those were the best nights. Not because they were happy. But because they were empty. Empty of worry. Empty of memory. Empty of planning. Just breath and dark. Those nights passed faster. But most nights had thoughts. And people accepted them like they accepted cold. They did not fight too hard. They let thoughts come. Let them go. If a thought stayed too long, they shifted their body. Movement sometimes shakes thoughts loose. They focused on breathing. Slow in. Slow out. They listened to the ship. The ship was always there. Moving. Speaking in wood and water. The ship did not care about thoughts. It just kept going. That was comforting. Your thoughts might wander anywhere, but your body was still on this ship, moving in one direction. Night reminded you of that. No matter what you thought, you were still here. So you lay there. Thinking or not thinking. Cold or not cold. Tired always. And eventually, sleep came again. Thin. Light. But enough to carry you to morning. Where thoughts would quiet again under the weight of work. Chapter 8. When storms make sleep almost pointless. Some nights were simply not for sleeping. You could try. You could lie down. You could close your eyes. But the sea would not allow much to happen. Storms did not arrive politely. They built themselves in pieces. Wind first, stronger than before. Waves taller than before. Then rain, not steady, but sharp and loud. On those nights, most people did not bother trying to sleep deeply. They knew better. They laid down when they could. They sat when they had to. They stood when there was no choice. The ship moved like it was alive and unhappy about it. Up, down, tilt, shake. Anyone lying down had to hold on to something. A rope, a bench, a rib, your own belt. If you did not hold on, the ship would move you whether you wanted it to or not. Cold felt worse in storms. Wind found every gap. Rain soaked everything. Spray flew wherever it liked. You could be lying down and suddenly feel cold water hit your face. It made you gasp, then cough, then wipe your mouth. After that, sleep was gone for a while. People slept in very short pieces. A few minutes. Then movement, or noise, or cold would wake them. No one expected good rest. They just tried to stay in one piece. On storm nights, everyone was more alert, even in sleep. Your ears stayed open. Your muscles stayed ready. If someone called out, you woke fast. If something broke, you moved without thinking. Storms made the ship loud. Wood groaned. Ropes strained. The sails snapped and complained. The water did not whisper anymore. It spoke in heavy sounds. Even people who usually slept through noise woke often. Some people prayed quietly. Not loudly. Just words inside their mouths. Others did not pray. They just listened. Storm nights made time feel slow and fast at the same time. Each moment was heavy, but the night itself passed strangely. You could not mark hours. You only knew if it was still dark. Sometimes storms lasted all night. Sometimes they came and went. When they went, they left things changed. Clothes wetter. People more tired. The ship sometimes damaged. After a storm passed, people slept deeply. Even if it was still night. Even if only for a short time. Exhaustion pushes sleep through anything. But during the storm, sleep was thin. Almost useless. Some people did not even lie down. They sat with backs against ribs. Cloaks pulled tight. Waiting. They might doze for seconds at a time. Head dropping. Then snapping up when the ship moved. Those seconds were all they got. Children slept more than adults even in storms. Their bodies did not know how dangerous things were. They slept when they could. Adults watched children with one eye open. Making sure they did not slide. Making sure they did not roll too far. No one talked much during storms. Talking was lost in noise anyway. After the storm, when the sea calmed, people looked at each other and knew what they had all been through. No words were needed. But this is about sleeping, so we stay with that. Storm nights taught people not to expect anything from sleep. Sleep was a visitor, not a promise. If it came, you took it. If it did not, you waited. Waiting became a kind of rest too. You leaned. You breathed. You listened. Your eyes closed sometimes, even if your mind did not. And that was enough to keep going. By morning, when the sky lightened, people looked like they had been used. Eyes red. Faces stiff. Hands slow. But they moved anyway. They always did. Because storm or calm, night or day, the ship kept going. And everyone on it had to keep going too. Chapter 9. When the cold becomes part of the body. After enough nights at sea, cold stops feeling like something outside you. It feels like something inside you. At first, cold is an enemy. You fight it. You wrap. You curl. You shiver. Later, cold is just there. Like your bones are made of it. You still try to stay warm. You still pull cloaks tight. But part of you accepts that some cold will always remain. You stop noticing small chills. You only notice big ones. Your hands learn to work while numb. Your feet learn to move while stiff. At night, when you lie down, you no longer expect to be warm. You just hope not to be colder than yesterday. That becomes your measure. People talked about cold differently then. They did not say, "I am freezing." They said, "It is colder than usual." Cold had levels. Some nights were only cool. Those felt almost pleasant. You slept better on those nights. Some nights were sharp. Those were harder. Some nights were deep cold. The kind that stays in your joints even when you move. Those nights were remembered. On deep cold nights, people lay very close. They shared cloaks. They pressed together. They made piles more often. Breath filled the air like smoke. Faces were hidden. Movement was slow. Fingers were slow. Sleep was strange. Shivering wakes you. But shivering also makes you tired. So you drift in and out. Shiver. Sleep a little. Wake. Shiver again. It feels endless. But it is not. Nothing is. People learn how to wake without hurting too much. They flexed fingers before opening hands. They wiggled toes before standing. If you stood too fast when very cold, pain shot through your legs. So you learned to wake slowly. Older sailors hated cold more. Their joints complained louder. They moved slower in the morning. No one rushed them. Cold made everyone quiet. Not because it was serious, but because it took energy to talk. On cold nights, people dreamed of heat. Fires. Sunday warm rooms. Thick clothes. Some dreamed of summer fields. Some of baths. Some of lying in sunlight doing nothing. Those dreams were gentle. Waking from them felt cruel. But you got used to that too. Cold also changed how things sounded. Wood sounded different when cold. More tight. More sharp. You could hear the ship complain in new ways. You learned those sounds too. If a sound was wrong, you woke. Cold made everything smaller. Movement. Thought. Words. It made nights feel longer. But people did not talk about how long nights felt. They just lived through them. After many nights like this, people's faces changed. Skin roughened. Eyes narrowed slightly, like they were always looking into wind. Their bodies carried cold in them even when the day was warm. Some said that even in summer, they felt winter inside. They would sit near fires longer than others. They would wear cloaks when others did not. The sea had taught them cold. At night, when they lay down, cold felt familiar. Not friendly. Just familiar. They no longer fought it loudly. They adjusted. They accepted. They rested inside it. That is not strength in a heroic way. It is strength in a quiet, tired way. The kind that does not show. The kind that just keeps going. Chapter 10. The Long Habit of Sleeping This Way. After enough time, sleeping on a longship stopped feeling like a strange thing you were doing for a while. It started to feel like the normal way to sleep. Not good. Not comfortable. Just normal. People who had been at sea for months or years could not remember exactly when that change happened. There was no single night when someone thought, "Now I am used to this." It happened quietly, like rust forming. One night you are thinking, "I hate this." Another night you are thinking, "This is how nights are." And then one night you are not thinking about it at all. Your body learns faster than your mind. It learns how to lie on wood without waking every time you shift. It learns which muscles to relax and which to keep ready. It learns how to breathe so that cold air does not bite as sharply. You stop waking every time the ship moves. Your inner balance learns the rhythm. When the hull rises, your body leans without you deciding. When it dips, your muscles answer before thought arrives. This is not something you are proud of. It just happens. People who return to land after long voyages often notice this. They would lie in a bed and feel wrong. Too soft. Too still. Some could not sleep the first few nights. They would toss. Turn. Miss the movement. They would wake in panic because nothing was rocking them. Their body expected motion and did not find it. Some even said they felt like they were floating in a strange way on land, like the world had become water. They would sit up, touch the floor, press their hand into something solid just to remind themselves where they were. That feeling passed, but slowly. This shows how deeply nights at sea changed people. Back on the ship, nights followed patterns that no one wrote down. You lie down when you can. You find your place. You curl. You pull your cloak tight. You listen. You sleep. You wake. You adjust. You sleep again. Over and over. Some nights you barely remember. Some nights stay with you. But most blend together into one long memory of wood and wind. People did not tell stories about these nights. They told stories about battles, storms, landings. But when they closed their eyes at home, it was often not those stories they saw. They saw planks. They felt cold. They heard water. Because those were the moments they had lived the most. Heroes are remembered for what they do during the day. But they become who they are during the night. Night shapes the body quietly. It teaches patience. It teaches stillness. It teaches how to be uncomfortable without making noise about it. Those lessons stay. Some sailors became known for sleeping anywhere. On ground. On benches. Against walls. People would say, "He can sleep like he is still on a ship." That was not a compliment exactly. But it meant something. It meant he had learned this long habit well. Young sailors took longer to learn it. At first, they complained more. They shifted more. They woke others more often. Older sailors did not scold them much. They knew learning took time. They might say quietly, "Lie still. Let the ship teach you." And it did. It taught through cold. Through motion. Through repetition. Not all lessons are gentle. Now imagine a man who has spent many years at sea. He lies down on a longship as easily as someone lies down in a bed. He does not look for softness. He looks for balance. He does not expect warmth. He just expects to manage cold. He curls without thinking. He breathes into his cloak without noticing. He hooks his foot around a bench leg without remembering when he learned to do that. His body does all this by itself. His mind follows later. When he sleeps, his sleep is light but steady. He wakes easily, but not in fear. He knows the ship. He knows what sounds mean danger, and what sounds mean nothing. When a new sound comes, he wakes fully. When an old sound comes, he stays drifting. This is not bravery. It is familiarity. Familiarity makes hard things quiet. Now think about how many people live like this. Not just warriors. Traders. Fishermen. Messengers. Families. Anyone who used the sea learned these nights. Some learned them for a season. Some for a lifetime. The sea took part of their sleep and never gave it back. But it gave something else instead. It gave a kind of steadiness. A person who has slept badly for many years learns not to expect much. And a person who expects little is hard to disappoint. They do not look for perfect nights. They look for good enough. That changes how you live. You become less demanding of comfort. More patient with discomfort. Not because you are strong in a loud way. Because you are tired in a deep way. And tired people often become gentle. Not always kind. But gentle. They do not move fast unless they must. They do not speak loudly unless they must. They save energy. That energy is used to keep going. At night, when such a person lies down, there is no ceremony. No frustration. No anger. Just the simple act of making a place where a body can pause. That is all sleep is then. A pause. Not a reward. Not a luxury. Just a pause. The pause between working and working again. Some nights the pause is longer. Some nights it is short. But even the shortest pause is something. People who have lived this way understand that. They do not complain much when they cannot sleep. They just rest in other ways. They lean. They breathe. They close their eyes even if sleep does not come. They let their muscles soften a little. They let their thoughts slow a little. That is enough to keep going. Now and then, a sailor who had lived this way for years would meet someone who had not. Someone from land. Someone who slept in beds. Someone who thought of night as a time for comfort. That person might look at the ship and say, "How do you sleep there?" The sailor might shrug. He might say, "You lie down." And that would be all. He would not explain the years of cold. The habits. The curled bones. The half-sleep. Because those things are hard to explain. You can only learn them by living them. And most people did not need to. But Vikings and other sailors did. So their nights were different from most. Not dramatic. Not heroic. Just long. Just cold. Just ordinary in a way that most people never experience. And over time, those nights became part of who they were. They carried those nights in their bodies. In how they sat. In how they stood. In how they slept even when the sea was far away. They carried the ship inside them. And at night, when they closed their eyes, part of them was always still there. On wood. In wind. Listening to water. Resting in a way that was never deep, but always enough. Because it had to be. And because it always was. Chapter 11. When sleep follows them onto land. When sailors finally left the ship for a long time, they thought sleep would become easy. A bed. A roof. No wind. No waves. It sounded simple. But bodies do not forget quickly. The first nights on land often felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. Too soft. Some laid down and waited for the floor to move. It did not. They waited for wood to creak under waves. It did not. Silence pressed on them in a new way. They turned from side to side. Not because they were uncomfortable, but because their body expected change. The body that has learned motion becomes uneasy in stillness. Some sailors woke suddenly in the night, heart beating fast, sure something was wrong. But nothing was wrong. That was the problem. They would sit up, listen, hear only quiet. They might walk around just to feel movement again. Some slept better on the floor than in a bed. Beds were too soft. Too deep. They missed the hard flatness of planks. Some rolled off beds in their sleep, trying to curl around something that was not there. They would wake on the floor, confused but not surprised. Others slept with a foot hanging off the bed, like they were hooking it around a bench. They needed something to hold. Cold also followed them. Even in warm houses, some sailors felt cold at night. Their bodies expected it. They would pile on blankets while others lay lightly covered. They would sit close to fires longer than anyone else. People noticed this. They would say, "You still live like you are at sea." The sailor might nod. Or shrug. He did not know how to live any other way. Dreams also changed. At first, many dreamed of the sea. Not storms. Not battles. Just movement. They dreamed of lying on wood while water passed beneath. They dreamed of the slow rise and fall. They woke feeling like they had not moved at all. Some missed that. Others did not. Some dreamed of being cold and could not get warm even in the dream. They woke pulling blankets tighter. Over time, these dreams faded. But they did not disappear completely. Years later, a man might dream of the sea again for no clear reason. He might wake with the taste of salt in his mouth, even though there was none. Habit leaves marks. Sailors also kept some nighttime habits without noticing. They slept lightly. Even on land. Small noises woke them. A door closing. A dog moving. Wind in trees. They woke and listened, ready to move. Only after a moment did they remember they were safe. Some never lost this. They became people who were always half awake. People said they were good guards. But they were just used to listening. They also kept the habit of sleeping in pieces. A little now. A little later. They might nap during the day without planning to. Their bodies still worked on ship time, not land time. Wives and families noticed this. They would say, "You never sleep all at once." The sailor might answer, "I never did." Children who grew up around sailors learned this too. They saw fathers who woke easily and slept lightly. They copied that without knowing why. So the sea passed into families. Not through stories. Through sleep. Some sailors stayed at sea their whole lives. They never had to learn land sleep again. For them, the ship was home. But many did come back. They worked on land. They fished near shore. They traded. They lived quiet lives. But their nights were never fully quiet. They always listened for something. Even when nothing was there. This is not sadness. It is just change. When you live one way long enough, another way feels strange. Some sailors liked the restlessness. It made them feel useful. They would get up early, fix things, walk. They did not lie in bed long. Stillness felt like wasting time. They did not complain about sleep. They just accepted it as it came. People asked them sometimes, "Do you sleep well?" They might say, "I sleep enough." That was the truth. Enough. Not perfect. Not deep. Enough. And enough is a kind of peace. A quiet, tired peace. The kind that does not need words. The kind that just lets life move forward. Slowly. Like water under wood. Even when the wood is far away. Chapter 12. The Nights That Never Fully End. Some nights feel like they last forever. Not because the clock says so. Not because the sky stays dark. But because the body and mind have learned a different rhythm. Sailors who spent long months at sea carried those nights with them. Even when they returned to land, the nights did not stop. They simply changed shape. The first time back on land, you noticed it immediately. You lie down in a bed, expecting relief. Soft sheets, a roof overhead, warmth. But the body remembers wood, the wind, the cold, the slow rise and fall of a hull. Your muscles anticipate motion. Your ears anticipate groans. Your eyes anticipate darkness punctuated by movement. The night does not deliver what the body expects. You wake repeatedly. You shift. You pull blankets tighter. You curl. You uncurl. Sleep becomes patchwork. A few minutes here, a little longer there. Not restful in a traditional sense, but enough to survive. People around you do not understand. They sleep deeply, long. They wake slowly. They dream in vivid, continuous patterns. You wake with fragments of dreams that make no sense. A wave rises, and you wake thinking it is real. A rope snaps, and your body jolts. A distant sound, and you are instantly alert. The nights stretch in memory. They become long. Continuous. A blur of dark, cold, half-wakefulness. Time changes meaning. A night might feel like an hour. Or like 5. You do not know. You do not need to know. You only know how it feels, cold, uneven, and always moving in some way. The body develops strategies. You learn where to place your hands. How to lie so that if the floor tilts, you do not fall. How to keep warm with minimal movement. How to rest while staying ready. Even when completely safe on land, these strategies persist. You curl one way, tuck your knees, loop a blanket around a leg. You breathe in patterns learned on water. You wake at small noises. Sometimes you wake and do not know where you are. The bed feels like a ship. The room feels like waves. The walls like wood ribs. You get up quietly. You walk. You check windows, doors, floors. You return. You lie down again. Not asleep, but resting. Waiting for sleep to arrive on its own terms. The mind follows the body slowly. Thoughts drift in fragments. Some memories of the sea intrude. A wave. A night anchor. The smell of salt on rope. The taste of cold water in your mouth. The sound of wind through an open hatch. Dreams mimic these sensations. Not fully, not clearly, but enough to confuse you. You might dream of lying on a deck cold and stiff. You might dream of motionless nights. You might dream of waking to find water over your boots. You wake with your heart beating. With hands clammy. With skin too sensitive to heat or cold. You realize the night continues even when the ship is gone. The body never fully lets go. Some people learn to cope. They move. They create routines. They sit by fires longer. They take walks at odd hours. They nap during the day. Others resist. They curse their sleep. They curse the nights. They long for normal beds. Normal blankets. Normal rest. But normal does not come easily. Not for bodies trained by motion, cold, and wind. Not for minds accustomed to half-wakefulness and patchwork dreams. Time itself bends. Hours are less meaningful. Nights are measured not by darkness, but by how the body feels. How alert it remains. How cold or warm it is. How many times it has woken. Some sailors become experts at these half-nights. They sleep lightly but efficiently. They rest their bodies in ways invisible to others. They wake quickly, move silently, breathe steadily. Others never master it. They toss. They turn. They wake often. They never fully adjust to land. Families notice. They comment on strange habits. Curling knees. Pulling blankets tight. Sitting up suddenly. Listening intently to distant sounds. Children copy what they see. The cycle continues. Sleep is no longer a simple act. It is a practice. A skill learned over months and years. A quiet endurance. Years at sea imprint on people in ways others do not see. They become familiar with discomfort, with uneven rest, with nights that never fully end. This changes them. They do not move as quickly as those who have slept soundly. They do not speak as loudly. They do not demand comfort. They adapt. They accept. They survive. The nights remain with them. In the muscles. In the joints. In the slow responses of hands and feet. In the twitch of an ear at small sounds. In the half-open eyes that have learned to see in darkness. Even when the sea is gone, it lives in their nights. Even when a roof shields them from wind and rain, their bodies anticipate cold. Even when a bed is soft and warm, their minds are alert. The nights never fully end. And yet, in their quiet way, these nights teach. They teach endurance, patience, observation, awareness. They teach that comfort is a luxury, not a right. They teach that the world continues moving, whether you are fully asleep or half awake. People who have learned this live differently. Not better. Not worse. Just differently. They do not complain. They do not boast. They lie down. They breathe. They rest. They wake. And when morning comes, they move. Slowly. Quietly. Carefully. The habits of 1,000 nights at sea stay with them, carried forward into every day, every step, every sleep that is never quite complete. This is how the body remembers. How the mind adjusts. How sleep continues to exist even when it should have ended. It is not dramatic. It is not heroic. It is just what is necessary. And it endures. Forever a part of them. Forever a part of how they sleep. Forever a part of what it means to rest at all. Chapter 13. The small routines that guide every night. By this point, sleeping at sea is no longer a single act. It is a series of small routines, invisible to anyone who has not lived through it. A kind of choreography that keeps the body and mind barely balanced, barely rested, but always ready. Before lying down, there is always preparation. Cloaks are adjusted. A spot is chosen carefully. You consider wind direction, moisture on the deck, movement of the ship, how close the person next to you sleeps. You never lie down without these thoughts, because if you do, you wake in discomfort. Not because of danger necessarily, but because the body remembers. The body knows what is coming. And when the body remembers, it complains. Some sailors shake out blankets. Some curl them into improvised pillows. Some lay a cloak beneath them to avoid wet planks. Some check boots to make sure they are tied tightly. You do not question these steps. You do them automatically. Like breathing. Some people sing softly to themselves. Not songs exactly, more like murmured patterns of words. They do not always know why. It calms them. It tells their body that night is coming, and it is okay to rest. Others touch small objects. A carved piece of wood. A coin. A keepsake. Not for luck. Not for meaning. Just to feel something solid while the rest of the world tilts and rocks. Children sleep differently. They cannot yet coordinate all these steps. They lie where they are told. They wrap in blankets haphazardly. They wake easily. They are lighter in body and mind. They nap more often. They require attention. Old sailors are more skilled. They can lie down on almost anything and drift off. They know how to fold themselves to match the slope of the deck. They know how to keep hands and feet warm with minimal movement. They can rest lightly while listening to a dozen subtle sounds, some of which do not even exist yet. The routines extend into breathing. Some count breaths. Some listen to the creaks of the hull and breathe in rhythm with them. Some breathe irregularly, unconsciously adjusting to wind gusts or distant waves. These routines, repeated night after night, become embedded in the body. You do not need to think about them. They happen automatically. You would not know how to stop them even if you wanted to. Even small movements matter. Rolling slightly to the left or right, just enough to avoid numbness. Lifting an arm to catch a cloak when the wind shifts. Pulling a blanket tighter around shoulders when a spray splashes unexpectedly. Every movement, every adjustment, every habit is there to preserve something delicate: sleep. Not perfect sleep. Not continuous sleep. Just enough sleep to function. People at sea develop microsleeps. Very short moments when the body rests without the mind noticing. Sitting upright. Leaning against a beam. Even standing briefly. A few seconds of rest add up over hours and nights. The longer you live at sea, the more you rely on these microsleeps. They become vital. You learn to notice the pause before it is gone. You learn to let it expand if possible. Some sailors also develop a rhythm of attention. While lying down, one part of the mind listens to water, wind, ropes, and fellow sleepers. Another part drifts. Both work together. Both rest and watch simultaneously. This skill takes years. Most never achieve mastery. Some try and fail. Some abandon hope. Others do it naturally, without realizing it, and never think of it as special. Small routines also govern the senses. You learn to sense subtle temperature changes. You feel moisture before it hits skin. You notice the faintest wind shift before it shakes a cloak. You recognize the difference between a normal groan of wood and a signal of tension. These sensory routines are so embedded that people carry them onto land. Even on solid ground, a sailor might pause before lying down, adjust a blanket carefully, check for drafts, even if none exist. The body remembers. The mind follows slowly. Even after leaving the ship for months, years, the routines persist. People might laugh at themselves, or at others, when they see these behaviors. Pulling blankets over feet while lying in a warm bed. Adjusting pillows repeatedly. Checking the door for movement. Counting breaths. But those routines are survival. They are comfort. They are familiarity. They are what allows sleep to exist at all. And when these routines are absent, even briefly, the body notices. Sleep becomes shallow. Dreams fragment. Nights feel longer. Fatigue builds faster. At sea, the routines are intertwined with everything else: work, watch shifts, navigation, meals, storms, weather, motion. You cannot separate one from another. Each part informs the other. Each part prepares you for the next night. Routine is not boredom. It is focus. It is adaptation. It is endurance. Through these small routines, people develop a quiet patience. Not a heroic kind. Not an ambitious kind. Just the patience to wait through hours and nights that seem to stretch endlessly. Sleep itself becomes less important than the act of lying down correctly. The act of being prepared. The act of listening while drifting. Some nights, even when storms come or cold bites, these routines save a person. They create tiny islands of comfort and stability amid chaos. They allow sleep to arrive in fragments. They allow the body to rest enough to continue. And over years, the routines shape the sailors as much as the sea itself. They move differently. They adjust constantly, even when it seems unnecessary. They listen more. They speak less. They conserve energy. Not because they are strong. Not because they are clever. But because the routines demand it. Sleep at sea is not about lying down. It is about living in rhythm with the world around you. With water. With wind. With motion. With fellow humans. With cold. With time. Those who master it carry it forever. Even on land. Even in warmth, even in stillness, the small routines persist, invisible to anyone else, vital to the body that remembers. And in those routines, sleep finally becomes possible. Not perfect, not complete, but enough. Enough to face another night, another cold, another wave, another hour of quiet endurance. Because that is all a night at sea truly offers. And yet, it is everything. Chapter 14. The rhythm of nights and days that blend together. After long months at sea, nights and days stop feeling separate. Not in a poetic sense. Not in a mystical sense. They simply blend, overlap, and fold into one another. The mind stops asking, "What time is it?" The body asks only, "Am I cold? Am I ready? Can I rest yet?" When you wake, sometimes it feels like you never slept. Other times, it feels like you never woke. You do not mark days with sunlight or clocks. You mark them with sensations. Wind from the starboard side. A shift in the current. A groan in the hull. The creak of a rope under tension. This rhythm becomes a kind of quiet music. Not loud. Not commanding. But persistent. Continuous. You learn its beat. You learn to move with it without thinking. People develop their own personal measures. Some notice that when the hull tilts a certain way, a sleep cycle ends. Others notice that a particular wind brings longer microsleeps. Others adjust breathing to match motion. All of it is subtle, almost imperceptible. Over time, the body internalizes these rhythms. Sleep becomes semi-automatic. You lie down, and part of your body sleeps while another part remains alert. Not a conscious choice. Not a heroic effort. Just adaptation. Food also follows these rhythms. You eat when there is opportunity. You do not plan by hour. You do not anticipate by sunlight. You anticipate by need and motion. The stomach becomes a metronome, guiding the body between rest and action. The mind adjusts too. Dreams are short, fragmented, sometimes meaningless. Sometimes they are accurate simulations of the deck, the ship, the sea. Sometimes they are just a pause, an echo of motion. Sleep itself is lighter than most people expect. Deep sleep is rare. Even when it comes, it is fleeting. The body prefers shallow, constant awareness. It is safer. It is useful. People notice each other's rhythms. Sailors who have been at sea together for months can predict when someone will wake, shift, or sigh. They do not communicate about it. They just know. The rhythm becomes a shared experience, a quiet bond. Even storms fall into this pattern. When a storm begins, the rhythm changes. Sleep fragments further. Microsleeps dominate. Movements are coordinated unconsciously. The body and mind react together. The night does not stop, but the rhythm accommodates it. After storms, when calm returns, the body does not instantly adjust. It carries the echo of disruption. Sleep is uneven. Some hours are deeper than usual. Others are impossibly light. But over time, balance returns. On land, these rhythms persist. Not in the obvious ways. Not in habits visible to others. But in the body and mind that remember. A sailor lying in bed might wake multiple times, listening instinctively to the air, imagining the ship moving beneath him, adjusting posture without thinking. Even in cities or villages, with roofs and walls and warmth, nights carry the rhythm of motion, wind, and cold. The body that learned to sleep like this cannot fully unlearn it. Old sailors say this is why they wake early, why they sleep lightly, why they move so cautiously. Not out of fear. Not out of choice. Out of rhythm. A rhythm etched into muscle and nerve. The rhythm governs more than sleep. It governs thought, conversation, patience, energy, movement. You do not waste effort unnecessarily. You conserve. You observe. You adapt. Even when the sea is far away, its rhythm lingers. In the tilt of a room. In the echo of distant wind. In the pause before a footstep. Some nights, the rhythm is gentle. Soft, predictable, almost soothing. Sleep comes easier then. Dreams are less fragmented. Waking feels more natural. Other nights, the rhythm is sharp, uneven, fractured by small disturbances. Micro-sleeps are all you get. You wake often. You adjust constantly. You rest only partially. You learn to live with both kinds of nights, both kinds of rhythm, both kinds of sleep. The rhythm also teaches endurance, patience, quiet attention. You notice things others overlook: the sound of a loose rope, the scent of damp wood, the shift in temperature before the wind changes. These observations become part of sleeping. Not separate from it, not distractions, but companions. They help guide micro-movements, micro-adjustments, micro-rests. Families and communities sometimes notice. Children mimic it unconsciously. Partners learn small habits: adjusting blankets, holding an arm slightly differently, walking carefully in the dark. The rhythm is contagious. Silent. Invisible. Persistent. Time itself becomes less relevant. You measure life in movement, in rest, in micro-sleeps. Not in hours or days. Not in sunrise or sunset. Some people might call it disorienting. Others might call it cruel. But those who have learned it accept it. They live by it, move by it, sleep by it, and wake by it. Even when they leave the sea forever, the rhythm continues. It is embedded. It guides their posture, their attention, their rest. And the nights never truly end. They merely fold into days. Days fold into nights. Motion into rest. Sleep into wakefulness. This is how the sea stays with a person. Not in memory alone. Not in stories. Not in longing. But in the very rhythm of nights and days, in the slow, quiet persistence of body and mind that have learned to move with the world, wherever they are. This is the long habit of life at sea. The rhythm of nights that never fully end. The rhythm that teaches patience. That shapes endurance. That carries cold, motion, and quiet awareness forever. And even when land replaces water, even when soft beds replace planks, even when warmth replaces chill, the rhythm continues. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Not noticeably. But always. It moves within the body. It guides every pause, every breath, every tilt of the head, every turn in sleep. It is the silent echo of 1,000 nights at sea. And it never stops. Chapter 15. How the body remembers more than the mind. Sleep at sea is strange in ways people rarely notice until they are back on land. You might think the mind remembers most of it, dreams, thoughts, discomfort, but the body remembers more. Always more. Muscles carry the memory first. Knees curl automatically. Feet find support without thought. Arms rest in ways learned on planks. Even in beds on land, the body replicates the positions once necessary to survive motion, cold, and uneven surfaces. Joints hold the echoes of constant tiny adjustments. You straighten slowly. You rotate limbs carefully. You lift arms cautiously. Movements are deliberate, but not conscious. Not because you think you need to. Because the body learned long ago that rushing leads to pain or misbalance. Even balance itself changes. A sailor who has slept for years on moving decks adjusts unconsciously. On land, floors feel like they tilt slightly. Chairs feel unstable. Stairs are unpredictable. The body anticipates motion where none exists, because it knows what life once demanded. The mind takes longer to catch up. It notices eventually. It notices discomfort in beds, in rooms, and walking on solid ground. But the body has already adapted. It has learned the quiet routines of survival without debate. Some nights, the mind seems absent, drifting through fragments of dreams. But the body is always listening, always feeling, always ready. Even when awake for long stretches, the body acts as if it were preparing for sleep on the ship. Muscles remain partially tense, ready to adjust at a moment's notice. Breathing remains attuned to motion. Hands instinctively find something to grip if balance shifts. Cold, too, leaves marks. Not just in memory, but in circulation, in posture, in how one curls instinctively. Even when land is warm, the body expects cold. Layers are piled. Blankets wrapped. Feet tucked. Hands hidden. The body preserves the lesson, long after necessity has faded. The eyes, too, change. They notice subtle movements. Shadows. Flickers. Small disturbances in the periphery. The mind may not register them consciously, but the eyes do. Muscle memory and vision. A survival mechanism learned during countless half-nights, where sound and motion could signal danger or discomfort. Even sleep itself becomes patterned. Microsleeps persist, even on solid ground. Brief pauses while sitting. Slight nods while standing. Tiny moments where the body rests while the mind drifts lightly. Not restorative sleep, perhaps, but enough to carry energy forward. Some sailors learn to exploit these micro-rests. Others do not notice them at all. Some wonder why they feel perpetually tired, even with beds and warmth. They carry the rhythm of the sea unknowingly. Families observe these behaviors with curiosity. Partners notice careful adjustments, habitual tucks of blankets, light awakenings at small sounds. Children unconsciously replicate these patterns. The ship lives within them. Dreams also adapt. Instead of the full narratives others experience, they become fragments of motion, cold, and sound. Dreams that imitate rocking. Dreams that echo planks creaking, wind rustling sails, distant waves. Not dramatic. Not frightening. Just continuous, as life was. When storms pass, these routines remain. Even if the ship is long gone. Even if land surrounds the sailor, the body expects disruption, expects movement, expects instability. This is the subtle legacy of life at sea. It teaches endurance without glory, patience without recognition, awareness without ceremony. Even years later, a sailor may wake at night and find his hand instinctively gripping the edge of a bed. Not for fear, not for comfort. Because the body remembers the rhythm of nights that demanded vigilance. The body does not forget cold, motion, discomfort, the slow accumulation of countless nights of fragmented sleep. And because the body remembers more than the mind, even if the sailor thinks he has fully returned to land, part of him is still at sea. He moves differently. He sleeps differently. He listens differently. Even when life seems normal, he is not quite at home. This is not sadness, not regret, not longing. It is adaptation, survival, habit. Years at sea do not vanish when you step ashore. They imprint on flesh, muscle, joint, and nerve. They shape how a person lies down, how a person stands, how a person rests. Even the smallest, most unconscious actions reflect the long memory of nights spent half awake, half asleep, on cold planks in motion, listening to water and wind, learning to survive one night at a time. The mind will forget most details. Stories fade. Names, places, events, many disappear. But the body does not. The body carries the rhythm of the ship. The rhythm of nights that never fully ended. The rhythm of cold, motion, and small adaptations that allowed sleep to exist at all. It is quiet. It is invisible. It is persistent. And it lasts a lifetime. Not in glory. Not in drama. Not in storybooks. Just in the slow, precise, and enduring memory of a body that has learned to live and sleep in a way few ever do. And that is enough. Chapter 16. The Quiet Endurance of Endless Nights. After years at sea, some sailors come to understand that sleep is not a reward. It is not a luxury. It is not a pause from life. It is endurance, measured in small increments, learned habits, and bodily memory. The body adapts first. Muscles know how to curve along a plank. Knees bend to support weight. Hands curl around rails, ropes, benches. Even in beds on land, the body instinctively seeks the angles, the tension, the subtle shifts it once required to survive cold, motion, and fatigue. Cold is no longer an enemy. It is a constant companion. Not friendly. Not cruel. Just present. It threads through the body. It shapes posture. It shapes breathing. It shapes sleep. People learn to rest inside it. Not fully warm. Not fully comfortable. Just enough to lie still, enough to drift, enough to survive. Micro-sleeps dominate nights. A few seconds here. A few minutes there. The body learns to rest without ceasing to listen. The mind drifts lightly while muscles hold tension. The sailor is partially awake, partially asleep, and entirely adapted to the rhythm of life on the ship. Noise is filtered by instinct. The creak of wood, the slap of a wave, the distant gust of wind. Some awaken fully. Others drift on. The body distinguishes between danger and routine. Years of practice allow it to prioritize. Sleep continues, despite everything, in fragments that accumulate quietly into endurance. Routines guide behavior. Before lying down, sailors check cloaks, blankets, and footing. They adjust for drafts, moisture, and slanting planks. Breathing aligns with ship motion. Limbs settle into pre-learned positions. These routines require little thought. They are automatic. They are survival made habitual. Storms complicate sleep. On stormy nights, fragments shrink. Micro-sleeps become the only possible rest. The ship rocks violently. Rain, wind, and spray demand constant minor adjustments. Every movement matters. Energy is conserved carefully. Even children sleep lightly, guided by instinct and observation. Adults remain alert even while drifting. When the storm passes, sleep comes in waves. Exhaustion pushes deeper rest, but the rhythm never fully vanishes. Even on land, sailors wake at small disturbances, adjust instinctively, and continue micro-sleep cycles. The body carries the lessons forward, long after the sea is gone. Time loses meaning. Nights bleed into days. Days drift into nights. Sunrise and sunset become incidental markers. Sleep is measured not by hours, but by readiness, balance, and the accumulation of tiny rest fragments. The mind follows slowly. Dreams are fleeting. Fragments of cold decks, rocking hulls, whispered words, distant waves. They appear without narrative or drama. They drift, dissolve, and leave only a lingering awareness of motion and endurance. Families notice these habits. Partners see careful adjustments of blankets. Children mimic the alert, light movements. Entire households carry echoes of the ship's rhythm. Awareness of micro-movements, listening to subtle sounds, conserving energy. Life at sea imprints invisibly onto everyone around the sailor. Older sailors move differently. Slower, deliberate, always prepared. Younger sailors take longer to learn these rhythms. Some never do. They wake more often. They shift more. They misalign with the natural micro-rhythms of motion. The body adjusts more slowly than time allows. Cold shapes posture, joints, and circulation. Movement is measured. Hands curl instinctively. Feet flex automatically. The body remembers winter, wind, and water in subtle ways. Even warmth on land does not erase the imprint. Sleep always carries a faint echo of cold. The quiet endurance becomes a form of patience. Not a heroic kind. Not a visible kind. Just survival. Living with discomfort without complaint. Observing small changes in the environment. Reacting appropriately. Conserving energy. Accepting that rest is never complete, but it is sufficient. Even years after leaving the sea, these habits persist. Nights never fully end. The rhythm continues. Bodies wake lightly. Micro-adjustments occur without thought. Breathing remains attuned to motion. Even on solid, still ground, the body anticipates change. Sleep is measured in fragments, in preparation, in small routines, in awareness. It is not restful in a traditional sense. It is functional, adaptive, enduring. Enough to face another day. Enough to face another night. Enough to continue moving. Endurance extends beyond the individual. Families, partners, and children carry aspects of these rhythms. The quiet habits of night influence daily life. Awareness, patience, energy conservation. Adaptation to subtle cues. The sea continues in the household long after the ship is gone. The sailors who mastered this endurance are not celebrated for it. They are not praised. They are not admired. They are quietly competent, permanently altered by nights that demanded attention, vigilance, and adaptation. Even on land, they live partly at sea. Movement, posture, sleep patterns, habits, awareness, they carry the ship within them. The rhythms of nights, of cold, of motion, of fragmented sleep remain embedded in the body. Sleep is no longer just rest. It is a practice, a series of adaptations, a measure of patience, a reflection of years spent living with instability, cold, and the quiet demands of night. Through it all, they survive. Always. Not through heroism, but through persistence, quiet awareness, and the subtle endurance learned one fragment of sleep at a time. The nights continue. Always. And the body remembers. Chapter 17. The lasting echo of nights at sea. By the time a sailor has spent years, even decades, at sea, something remarkable has happened. Not remarkable in a dramatic or heroic way. Not something anyone would write about in books or sing about in songs. But remarkable in the quiet persistence of the body, mind, and memory. Sleep is no longer simple. It never truly was. On a longship, sleep is measured in fragments, in micro-rests, in the balance between stillness and constant readiness. And over time, the body internalizes that. It carries the memory long after the ship is gone. The sailor wakes on land and finds the body still behaves as if planks lie beneath him. The joints anticipate motion that isn't there. Limbs curl instinctively. Hands reach for support without conscious thought. Even in a soft bed, the body seeks angles and support that no bed provides. Cold remains a companion. Not in a threatening way, not actively painful, but woven into posture, circulation, and awareness. Blankets are pulled tighter, layers are retained, feet remain tucked, hands hidden. Warmth is appreciated but never fully expected. The body remembers the chill of long nights and prepares for it reflexively. Micro-sleeps continue. The body rests in fragments. Sitting upright. Leaning lightly. Even standing. Short pauses that add up. Sleep is never continuous. It is functional, adaptive, and unassuming. Enough to maintain energy and awareness. Enough to continue, always. Dreams, too, are influenced. They are no longer continuous narratives. They drift in fragments, creaking wood, distant waves, the low hum of wind through sails. No storm is dramatic. No danger is threatening. Just motion, just rhythm, just echoes of nights spent half awake, half asleep. Even the mind adapts. Awareness continues in sleep. Tiny noises wake the sailor. The shuffle of feet. The creak of a door. The distant rustle of wind. Reflexive attention persists long after the sea is gone. Vigilance has become a habit. Families notice. Partners and children witness the subtleties of the habit. Careful adjustments of blankets. Shifts of posture. Brief awakenings at insignificant sounds. The household, unknowingly, absorbs fragments of the ship's rhythm. Life at sea does not vanish. It spreads quietly into everyday living. Time becomes an abstraction. Nights and days fold together. Hours are irrelevant. Sleep is no longer measured by darkness or sunlight but by the body's readiness, the rhythms of micro-rests, and the cumulative fragments of rest that maintain function. The sailor's body is a vessel of memory. Not memory of events or stories. Not memory of glory or battle. Memory of nights, of cold, of motion, of tiny adjustments repeated thousands of times. Muscle memory, joint memory, sensory memory. Every limb, every tendon, every nerve carries the echo of the ship. Cold shapes posture permanently. Motion shapes reflexes permanently. The habits of tiny routines, developed over countless nights, become part of identity. They remain visible only to those who know to look for them. Slight tilts of the head, careful placement of feet, automatic micro-adjustments of limbs. Even the rhythm of attention persists. Micro-sleeps, light awakenings, rapid responses to small disturbances. These are not conscious choices. They are embedded habits, formed over years of necessity and repeated exposure. The sailor carries endurance without dramatics, patience without ceremony, awareness without spectacle. The nights that demanded vigilance, adjustment, and survival have left permanent marks, not on ego, but on body and mind. On land, in warmth, in soft beds, in quiet houses, the rhythms continue. The body anticipates motion that is not there. Limbs adjust automatically. Breathing maintains subtle patterns learned for motion. Hands and feet prepare for cold that no longer exists. Sleep is functional, fragmentary, efficient, and always attentive. This is not sadness, not longing, not trauma. It is adaptation, survival. Life, learned one fragment of sleep at a time. The sailor moves differently, sleeps differently, listens differently, thinks differently, not because he is exceptional, not because he desires it, because years of nights at sea shaped him irrevocably. Even decades later, the body remains a record of those nights. Muscles, joints, reflexes, and sensory perception retain the quiet lessons. The mind may forget specific events. It may forget the sound of waves or wind. But the body remembers. Sleep, finally, is understood not as rest, but as endurance. A necessary adaptation. A series of small actions repeated over and over until they become instinct. Enough to function. Enough to live. Enough to continue another day, another night, another wave. Families, communities, and descendants carry these lessons unknowingly. Movements, habits, attention to subtle cues, patience, awareness, endurance, all trace echoes of the sea. The nights, though ended, never truly leave. They fold into days, into lives, into bodies. They shape people quietly, invisibly, persistently. And in every sailor who has known them, part of the ship remains. Not in memory, not in longing, not in story, but in posture, in breath, in micro-movements, in the enduring rhythm of life learned through nights that never fully ended. This is the lasting echo, the quiet persistence, the endurance of sleep at sea. And it never stops. It moves with the sailor forever. Chapter 18: The Invisible Imprint of a Life at Sea. By the time a sailor has spent decades on the water, something subtle but profound occurs. Life at sea leaves an imprint not on memory alone, but on every fiber of the body. It is invisible to most, but impossible to erase for the one who has lived it. Sleep is no longer a singular act. It is continuous adaptation. Fragmented, shallow, attentive. A practice that integrates cold, motion, wind, and subtle sounds into a pattern that the body can follow without thought. It is endurance more than rest. The body remembers long before the mind notices. Knees curl instinctively. Feet find leverage. Hands reach for support. Muscles flex to preserve balance. Even in a soft bed on solid ground, the body searches for angles learned on planks, slopes, and shifting decks. Sleep itself becomes a series of micro-adjustments, unconscious and persistent. Cold becomes a companion. Not as an enemy, not as a trial, but as a constant state woven into posture, circulation, and awareness. The sailor curls instinctively, layers remain, blankets are pulled tight, hands and feet stay hidden. Warmth is acknowledged but never expected. The lessons of cold persist, even in the comfort of land. Routines define the night. Tiny, repeated actions guide the sailor's rest, adjusting blankets, curling knees, shifting slightly to prevent numbness, aligning the body to anticipated movement. Each adjustment is automatic, learned through countless nights of necessity. They are habits that become identity. Micro-sleeps continue. A few seconds here, a few minutes there. Rest that is partial, adaptive, functional. Enough to maintain energy, awareness, and readiness. The sailor sleeps while remaining alert, unaware sometimes of how deeply this practice has become integrated into existence. Dreams reflect this life. They are fragmented. Echoes of motion, wood, wind, and faint creaks. No narrative. No drama. Just rhythm. Just sensation. Just memory encoded into the subconscious. Even decades later, a dream might return with the feel of a tilted deck, the weight of cold air, the quiet hum of waves. Families notice subtle habits. Partners watch careful movements. Children unconsciously copy postures, light awakenings, attentive listening. The rhythm of the sea extends beyond the individual, threading into domestic life. Awareness, patience, efficiency, silent legacies of long nights on longships. Time itself becomes malleable. Nights fold into days, days bleed into nights. Sunrise and sunset lose their significance. Sleep is no longer measured by hours, but by fragments, micro-adjustments, readiness, and the accumulation of tiny periods of rest. The body measures time more than the mind. Older sailors exhibit these lessons most clearly. Movements are deliberate. Micro-adjustments second nature. Cold shapes joints and posture permanently. Every action is filtered through decades of adaptation. Younger sailors, or those untrained, appear restless by comparison, their bodies unaligned with rhythms of long nights and constant motion. Even after leaving the sea entirely, these habits persist. Nights never truly end. Micro-adjustments, light awakenings, cautious movements, and posture adaptations continue as if the hull still lies beneath the bed. Reflexes honed in wind, rain, and cold persist in still air and warm rooms. Sleep becomes endurance, patience, and adaptation condensed into physical form. Not heroic, not dramatic, not observable. But persistent, enduring, invisible. Enough to continue another day, another night, another long stretch of life shaped by countless hours of half-sleep, cold, and motion. The body carries memory that the mind may forget. Muscle memory, joint memory, sensory memory. Every subtle adjustment, every curl, every twist of the body preserves lessons learned in countless nights. The mind drifts through fragments, the body remains vigilant, attuned, adaptive. Cold, motion, and micro-sleep leave permanent marks. They shape how a sailor sits, walks, sleeps, breathes, and responds to the world. Awareness persists quietly. Even decades later, the body anticipates instability, listens for subtle sounds, responds to imperceptible changes in environment. The rhythm of nights at sea extends beyond the individual. Families absorb fragments unconsciously. Children mimic micro-adjustments. Partners anticipate awakenings and subtle behaviors. Habits learned from nights on ships permeate daily life on land. Sleep at sea is not restful in conventional terms. It is functional, adaptive, enduring, fragmented but sufficient. Lessons are invisible. The sailor moves through life carrying the rhythm, the cold, the habits. Not as story or memory, but as living presence. Even years later, the sailor wakes slightly, adjusts instinctively, listens quietly, breathes patterns shaped by wind, motion, and cold. Limbs find support automatically. Micro-sleeps continue. Fragmented rest persists. Vigilance persists. This is the invisible imprint of a life at sea. It shapes the body, guides movement, preserves awareness, and carries endurance. Not in fame, not in drama, not in legend, but quietly, persistently, irrevocably. The sailor sleeps. The sailor wakes. The rhythm endures. Always. Forever. Chapter 19. The slow merging of night and memory. As years pass, sailors realize that sleep is not simply an act. It is a continuum, a gradual blending of body, mind, environment, and habit. Nights merge into memory, memory merges into posture, and the past never fully leaves, even on solid ground. The first nights on land are always strange. Beds are soft. Floors do not tilt. Walls do not groan. Air is warm. The body, however, expects something else. Cold planks, wind, spray, the slow, imperceptible motion beneath the feet. Sleep does not arrive immediately. It drifts, fragmentary, uneven, adaptive. Microsleeps dominate. Not restful in a conventional sense. Just enough to maintain awareness and energy. Moments of unconsciousness punctuate long periods of light attention. Muscles, joints, and senses adjust automatically. The mind follows slowly, sometimes confused, sometimes patient. Dreams are partial. Fragments of past nights filter through consciousness. A tilted deck. The sound of distant waves. A rope snapping lightly. Wind brushing the hull. Not dramatic. Not fearful. Just echoes. Shadows of nights long endured. Bodies remember more than minds. Limbs curl instinctively. Hands seek support. Feet flex in anticipation. Even decades later, the body preserves the rhythm of motion learned on ships, long after the water has receded from daily life. Cold leaves its mark as well. Circulation, posture, even unconscious habits. Sailors wrap blankets tightly. Layer clothing unnecessarily. Curl arms and legs instinctively. Warmth is acknowledged but never fully trusted. Small routines persist. Adjusting a blanket. Curling knees. Shifting slightly to avoid stiffness. Aligning posture with imagined motion. Checking doors, windows, or floors. These actions require no thought. They are automatic. Learned survival behaviors. Attention to subtle stimuli continues. The creak of a floorboard. Wind against a window. Distant movement. Micro adjustments follow instinctively. Even in quiet homes, the sailor listens in fragments, reacting to cues that are no longer essential. Children and partners unconsciously absorb these rhythms. Habits learned at sea extend beyond the individual. Awareness, patience, subtlety, efficiency, they become part of domestic life. Movement is careful, observation constant, energy conserved. The echoes of shipboard nights quietly shape everyday life. Time is malleable. Days fold into nights, nights into fragments of sleep, fragments into memory. Hours lose meaning. Sleep is not measured by sunlight or clock. It is measured by the body's readiness, the ability to endure, the accumulation of small rests. Older sailors exhibit these rhythms most clearly. Deliberate movement, careful posture, light awakenings, micro-sleeps. The body is always partly awake, partly resting. Reflexes are honed over decades. Awareness persists even without conscious attention. Even on solid land, the sailor anticipates instability. The body responds to imagined motion. Breathing follows a rhythm learned at sea. Limbs prepare for cold or sway that is not present. Sleep remains fragmented but functional. Adapted to endure, rather than to rest fully. Cold, motion, and micro-rests leave permanent imprints. Sleep becomes endurance. Awareness becomes habit. The body becomes a record of nights that never ended. Muscles, joints, senses, and reflexes preserve fragments of a long and constant rhythm. Sailors carry these lessons invisibly. Families feel them indirectly. Children mimic posture and alertness. Partners anticipate subtle behaviors. Domestic life becomes infused with fragments of shipboard patterns. Sleep is functional, adaptive, persistent. Not heroic, not dramatic, not complete. But enough. Enough to continue. Enough to endure. Enough to carry memory into years of land-based life. The nights never truly leave. They fold into every waking moment. They persist in posture, in micro-adjustments, in breathing, in reflexes, in attention. The rhythm of the sea becomes internalized. In bodies, in homes, in families. In habits that continue long after the ship is gone. And even decades later, sailors wake lightly. Listen quietly. Move carefully. Adjust instinctively. Breathe in patterns shaped by wind, cold, and motion. Micro-sleeps continue. Fragmented rest persists. Vigilance persists. The body remembers more than the mind. Memory of motion, cold, and micro-rests endures forever. The nights, the cold, the motion, the routines, they are not left behind. They persist invisibly, quietly, relentlessly. And this is the lasting echo of life at sea. The rhythm remains. Always. Forever.